Well, good morning, everybody. We're talking about philanthropy today. We're going to have a conversation about philanthropy and belonging from a couple of different perspectives. The philanthropy world's a unique space. Just to raise your hands, who here works in philanthropy in the audience? I guess we got a few folks. Private sector, okay, and then government. Okay, so mostly okay, focused on it. I guess just switch seats on me.
I have an ear infection, so I can
Oh,
only hear out of one ear, and it's just bitter.
and that's the side that I'm not
No,
on.
no,
So
I
okay.
can hear you.
Sort of tell my significant other that I can't hear her when she's yelling at me. I know. All right, let's do a round of introductions just so you guys know who we are. Um, I go by Ivan Barron because that's what they call me in the U.S. and that's what everybody knows me by. Ivan Barron. I'm originally from Mexico City, is where I was born. My family moved to the U.S. at the age of 9. So definitely inhabit different spaces. Um, and I have because growing up as an immigrant in the U.S., we really struggled financially quite a bit. And so I grew up on welfare and just needing a lot of help. And so I was always a recipient of of nonprofit and other organizations that had programs to support people like my family. And so ever since I was young, I was just always very grateful for the help we received. That led me career-wise start work in the public sector, worked in government, I worked in the nonprofit sector for many years, running lots of programs, primarily education focused. Um, had a real tough time in education. So do some learning disabilities and just being stubborn. I could not really do well educationally, and that was a real problem for me. I got thrown out of a lot of different schools and barely graduated high school and barely got into college and almost dropped out of college. Eventually in college, I figured out that it was a system that I needed to learn. It wasn't just that there was something wrong with me. There was a system and a way of doing things. And so I began to try to understand how I could be effective at that. I was and ended up actually doing quite well academically once in my later years in college. Then I got into public policy. So I got into public policy and wanted to learn how I could improve the education system so that it wasn't only for the kids that were good at, academics, but it could be good for everybody. I ended up finishing my master's in public policy from the Kennedy School, where that's where I did a lot of my sort of work around college access and helping young kids access to college. Because getting into college, as you guys know, is like a whole entire process unto itself. You have to have expertise in how to just get into college to even get into college. And then further education. I kept working for many years running programs for major foundations like J.P. Morgan Chase Global Philanthropies. Some parts of grants focused on with the Gates Foundation. That's was sort of my entry point. I realized that there were these investors who invested in philanthropy. That's what they were doing, and that was sort of an interesting world to me. But I was always on the nonprofit side for most of my career. Eventually, got my PhD in educational sciences because I really wanted to understand how learning happened and how you could take a human being and provide the right supports, training, identity work, and support networks, and you could create a professional that would be successful in the marketplace. So I took all that stuff and continued to apply that towards program building, and eventually went to work at the Gates Foundation, running a lot of programs around career readiness at colleges and universities across the country, right? Creating systems of career support. Then I got headhunted out of that in 2000, shortly after George Floyd and others, to run a foundation for the Pension Real Estate Association out of New York City. Pension real estate is enormous pools of capital by pension funds across the country and around the world that invest in a portion of those pension funds into real estate portfolios, trillions of dollars across the globe of money. And that trade association realized that it was not a diverse field, as you can imagine. Institutional real estate has been controlled. It's family money. It's father to sons passing on, because they were the landowners many years, right? And so investing in real estate at that level has always been sort of very closed off enterprise. And so the role of my foundation is to broaden the opportunity for career access and for people that have historically been underrepresented in that space to have access to institutional real estate space. These are life-changing careers if you get them. They're Wall Street careers. They're very powerful, but it's really been, like I said, the sons of, people who had real estate or worked in real estate. So we're working now. I'll talk a little bit more about the foundation in just a second, but that's just the background on this. And we've dealt a lot with in the era of in the last few years how we think about speaking about issues of diversity, access, and opportunity into these elite level careers because things are changing. That's what we're going to talk about today. That's my background. I'm going to give each of you a minute to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your work, and then we'll get on with the conversation.
Hi, family. I'm so happy to see y'all. I'm so happy to be here in Medellin. This is my first time here. I'm Kaya Henderson, and I am the Executive Vice President at the Aspen Institute and the Executive Director of a new center called the Center for Rising Generations. And I am blessed to have the opportunity to create a space where we ensure that leadership skills, leadership training, leadership opportunities are extended to young people, 14 to 24, as a predictable part of their growing up. No more, you're a great leader. We're going to train a couple of you. We're going to train everybody to be leaders so that our young people know how to lead themselves, how to lead their communities, how to lead the world. And I have to admit that I am not a philanthropist. I think I just kind of snuck on this panel for a little bit of a different perspective. I have raised hundreds of millions of dollars from philanthropy. And so I got some things to say about philanthropy and belonging. But I'm an educator. I've been an educator for 32 years. I started my career teaching middle school Spanish in the South Bronx through Teach for America. Many of you know me from my time serving as Chancellor of DC Public Schools, where over the course of 10 years, we changed the trajectory of that system from the lowest performing urban school district in the country to the fastest improving. I'm super excited to say that 9 years later, we're still the fastest improving urban school district in the country. And I'm excited to learn from you and share with you.
Hi, Giselle Shorter, President, CEO of Nellie Mae Education Foundation. We are amongst friends disproportionately, and so I will introduce myself as an infiltrator, right? And so as you talk about your experience, it is very similar to my parents' experience, right? And so both of my parents are one of 12. My father is from super rural Mississippi. Google still struggles to figure out where our family burial plot is today. My mother, born and raised in Spanish Harlem, same community that I am from. And so their message was very clear. My mother had a vision. She understood New York politics and where and how opportunities were afforded. And so she staged me in very clear and intentional ways and was very clear that my second language would be libertarianism. I speak it fluently, right? When we talk about what is the work of philanthropy and belonging and creating community, I think much about how we go into spaces and places and use our capital, right, to hold platform, to create spaces where people that would otherwise not be in conversation, quiet or public, can be in that kind of conversation. So really excited and proud of that. At Nellie Mae, we unapologetically, right, focus on supporting in-system actors as well as community ecosystem. So those youth, educator, parent, community organizers and organizations, there are folks that he was just talking about have for years, right, been in a circular fight. How do we actually support and organize folks around a bigger tent, bigger message, so that we can get our weight up, right? If the analogy that was just used at the last panel was we can't take a punch. How do we actually create a space where not only do we see toward what is winning and winning for mutual aid and benefit, right? But winning unapologetically without compromising our values, without compromising who we are in service of. How do we actually do that? And how do we think about the role philanthropy plays in creating those spaces? So excited to be in this conversation. Again, Nellie Mae focuses on and uses the test bed of New England. So the 6 states from Connecticut to the top of the US as our regional footprint, but wanting to create a space where we can actually drive change, support change in system, as well as the local ecosystem, elevate that as part of policy, as part of new ambition and vision, to point to what's possible, right? And what we can do for all of our young people. And so that race, class, indigeneity would not be a predictor of your experience of school or your outcomes. And so that's the world we're looking for.
Talk for a second about how you measure success. Right now, what are you guys targeting, giving your strategy, the measures of success that you guys are talking about, thinking about to say, this is how we know that we got ROI from these
Yeah.
outcomes?
So we are in the midst of a full-scale reset so that we can measure that, right? Because the hallmarks of winning, when you are base building, you are power building, are fundamentally different. They're not necessarily strictly about literacy, numeracy, right? So our origin story starts with personalized learning, students at the center. And it's an up, down, can the babies read, can they not? How did they perform on the standardized tests? That matters. I don't want to lose a generation, 2 generations of young people. And thank you, we also know that the current incentive structure within systems isn't such that folks have to disaggregate data, have to keep their eyes on who is least well served, right? And have the kind of incentives to go solve for who is the system working least and make it better, right? And so there are other measures that increasingly I'm putting before my board, and I have some of my board members in the room. Part of it is shared will, the kinds of campaigns, the kinds of testimony that 3 of my grantees gave before Congress, right, over the last day and a half. Right? Drawing our eyes back to, if we are watching a rapid shift in the policy, the political, the social landscape around schools and communities, we actually understand this playbook. We actually know how to win with this playbook. So if fair becomes the coin of the realm, it is no longer about equity. If it is about belonging, no longer about inclusion, okay, we've won on those issues. When we talk about what it means to ensure that schools, public schools, the system of a national public education affords every child quality education and an access, right, jump onto not just the bottom rung, but the middle to the top rung of what it means to be moving up the American dream, up that ladder. Okay, fine, we're not code switching in this room, we're not code switching here, but we know how to code switch. We know how to actually frame what we want for every child and then say, and here's what you get, and just don't forget, if the system produces these outcomes for you, how about we do it for everyone, right? And so that is part of the more nebulous set of criteria impact indicators. Shared vision, policy that's aligned to that shared vision, will and demand to interrogate who's least well served, and the ambition to do something about it. Because that's been the largest and most elusive part. We don't have the will to make a quality education available to every child at scale.
We're talking about the outcomes that you guys are tracking.
Yeah, well, I wanna turn it on its head a little bit, because I think it's one thing to talk about outcomes. First of all, philanthropy being so outcome driven, we have to respond to outcomes. I find that it is different to have a conversation about outcomes with people who look like me and come from a shared background. That's not most of the philanthropy that I deal with. And so I think we have a significant role to play in pushing philanthropy to redefine the outcomes that we're measured by. They choose outcomes that are important to them, and I actually think that there are different outcomes that are important to me. I think about my time serving as Chancellor of DC Public Schools, and I said to one of my colleagues, a white colleague, we were trying to figure out what to do with an additional $8 million to really accelerate academics. And he said, I think we should double block reading and math for our lowest performers. And at the time, I had a first grader who was not the lowest performer, but he was a little black 6-year-old who couldn't sit through a block of math or a block of reading, let alone a double block of reading and math. And so I said to my colleague, "Is that what you want for your kid?" And he said, "No." Oh, he said, "I want my kid to play an instrument, to speak a foreign language. I want my kid to master a sport. I want my kid to be a digital native. I want my kid to bloop, bloop, bloop." I said, "Well, wait a minute. You didn't say a word about reading or math." And he said, "That's a given." I said, "If that's what you want for your kids, then that's what we will do for the 50,000 kids in Washington, D.C. And so instead of double blocking reading and math, we put staffing in place to ensure that every single elementary school could have at least 45 minutes of art, music, PE, foreign language, and technology," right? I say that because the outcomes that they want to measure us by are reductionist. The outcomes that they want for their children are abundant and expansive. And so I will not set goals for my kids that are reductionist. I will push philanthropists that don't look like me or that aren't pursuing an impact agenda, to actually meet me where I am for what I want for our kids. And for far too long, I feel like philanthropy has been the tail wagging the dog. Philanthropy sets its strategic plans, and then we run around responding to those strategic plans. Well, in fact, I think that there is a role for real co-creation, and I've been lucky to have been engaged with some philanthropists who actually recognize that they have some expertise, but that practitioners have some expertise as well. And the best philanthropic investments that I've seen happen when co-creation between those folks is the way that business is done. We have to push philanthropy to not worry about what their measures of success are, but to respond to our measures of success and to help them reconceptualize what impact looks like for our communities.
Okay, thank you. We're going to talk about a couple other things, and then we're going to open it up for questions. I think the conversation will be really interesting once we get you guys' input. We're going to talk about belonging, right? Because that's the other part of this panel. So philanthropy, an interesting nebulous entity or, sector. But let's talk about belonging and the role of philanthropy in creating spaces of belonging. All just starts by saying, as I said earlier, the space that we inhabit in institutional real estate that my foundation houses, it's been very closed up for a long, long time. It feels like going back in time to kind of see who sits in that space, who's in leadership, and what they get to decide, right? And how there really has not been a space. However, in my space of institutional capital, there is a good number, a growing group of, BIPOC, women-led, whether it's funds or or investors, right, that represent the teachers' pensions, firefighters, et cetera, that are out there, but they're really scattered, they're not united. So what we set out to do is to create a space really for those folks to start coming together and having the conversations, about, how we unite, how we work together, what we think is success. Those spaces didn't exist before. But we had to be very smart about how we created the space. And in our sense, we created a foundation, and I'm building an endowment to make sure that we live longer besides the level of interest on Wall Street dies out for the post-George Floyd, era. So I want this to be around for a long time. I want there always to be people talking and thinking about these spaces, right? So that's how we in our space are creating a space for belonging. And we haven't called it belonging. We called it DEI. That's what we did. But things have changed, and we're going to talk about that change. We've had to back off in the last 12 months from using language, DEI and others, because the boards are nervous that we're going to get sued, or some of our grantees. And it's tough for our grantees because some of our grantees, we fund grantees in DC Urban Alliance, who works directly with kids in schools there, and Chicago, Detroit, New York, et cetera. They're at the forefront of saying we're all about, we denounce what's going on. We're on the forefront of, diversity and inclusion. But now so much of it, for us, we're having to sort of pull back some of that language, which is, and I'm having to caution them too to be careful, because nobody wants to inadvertently end up hurting kids' opportunities because we want to plant the flag right now. Is a very I'm just be honest, we're just a very nebulous time for us. We're waiting and seeing what happens. Again, it's Wall Street money that we basically raise. So we want more of it, not less. And so we're needing to be cautious. I'd love for you guys to talk about the space of belonging. How are you guys thinking about what belonging is and the, and again, in philanthropy, but also what changes you've seen in the last 12 months or so in how you guys are framing the work and thinking about it given the evolution of what's going on.
There are a few truths about our industry that I don't think we really talk about in diverse company. One, the overwhelming majority of philanthropy is rooted in family foundations. And so no matter what your role is, your entire job is to get to a yes and support whoever your trustees, largely the family, to shift their posture, but you are always advancing their will and purpose in the world. And so I always make the distinction, I am not a philanthropist, I am a philanthropoid, right? Liz and Don are philanthropists, it's their money. I am a paid professional. I am a steward of a corpus that now is an endowed fund, which is a very different dynamic than how I started in philanthropy, right? And so I think when we talk about this shift in measures, the kinds of coverage that I am afforded by my board of leading thinkers, doers, people that are sitting, CEOs, OGs of an industry working across research, practice, policy, right, and philanthropy, it's a very different dynamic, right? I don't know that they would say leading thinkers and doers, but that's how I would mirror back. And so it's a fundamentally different stance, right? In this stance, we also have to think about the moment you reference what is legal and how what is legal is shifting. But there is also what is politically prudent and what is reputationally prudent. And when we think about those three things, belonging starts to morph. I think there was a time, as you referenced, immediately following the very public murder of George Floyd, right? As a moment in time when we're all sitting at home watching it on a loop. He was not the first black man, but it was the first time that many others outside of our community were forced to watch what we see and we know intimately, right? And so there's this growth, there's this pouring out of, oh my God, the things you've been saying for generations, the kinds of policies, the kind of agenda that you've been advancing, we understand why in a different way. And so philanthropy moved a little. And we had been making gains. We have friends and colleagues across all walks of life that are moving the needle, that are showing progress in very clear ways that philanthropy could understand. You have Kaya in DC, right? You have the folks that are coming out of a Bloomberg-esque administration that then go into philanthropy and are rolling differently. You have more of us coming from the nonprofit sector, right? In my mind, in my identity, I think of myself as a community development person, a youth and community development person. And 7 years ago, I moved into philanthropy. I was a beloved but very noisy grantee. And my third largest funder invited me to join their team. And it was a very explicit trade. And it's a trade that I feel comfortable talking about because he's written about it. I threw my lot in with what I understood as a grantee to be a billionaire couple that when they knew better, understood better, they were willing to use their voice and more than just their capital to advance an agenda that they were looking to me and others to co-create with them. And so this toggle between what philanthropy historically has done to or for community. There are many of us that were starting to push with community, right? And lend our social capital, our networks, creating bigger tables, creating a space where folks that might have been an externality and were exerting extreme force on us could be in right relationship and start to build trust, right? And trust to help them not just see, but then also be moved, struck, and inspired to do something different. And I look across the room, I see folks like Sherman, folks that are leveraging and rolling in a different way. I see folks like Nikki, right? That doesn't happen without us and third wave values, but being in places and spaces. And so as we're sitting in this moment in the US where there is an all-out attack on certain ways of being because we made progress, because there are those that would want to reclaim what they saw as perfection and an advantage for them. I think we are at a crossroads where we have to be more intentional and strategic about who can do what legally, who can do what politically, who can do what reputationally, and how we move to a more strategic stance around creating not just belonging, but the long game, right? And so we have varied definitions of winning, but what we do in relationship, I think, is increasingly going to be important.
So, there's a part of me that feels like, yeah, we're not new to this, we're true to this. We need to change the language. We know how to change the language. We know how to code switch. We know how to dress it up and still do the work. And so I am it's interesting to watch people's reactions to the onslaught, right? As the last panel sort of pointed out, some people are overwhelmed. What? Like, this ain't the first time. This won't be the last time. Have you read a history book? Like, whatever. And we do our best work in times of crisis. We do our best work in times of crisis. And so I am quite optimistic about this particular moment. But if and only if we really get serious about working together. Like, we can't win with everybody leading their own consulting firm. We can't win with everybody having their own fund or whatever, or foundation or whatever. The only way we win is if we win collectively. And so, where are the rooms where people are getting together to say, how are we going to put our money together? What 3 things are we going to focus on? Because we can't win on all fronts. But if we hit 3 big enough and well enough, like, we can make real progress. Those are the conversations that I want to be having about belonging, right? I want to know who belongs to my community of revolutionaries, and how are we collectively deploying our resources, our capital, our connections to capital and resources. Because I think as I look around the room, many of us have earned favored spots in the philanthropic world. And we have been positioned for a moment such as this. Now is the time to leverage our relationships with the Gateses of the world, or with the Waltons of the world, or with the whoever's of the world, to do our work. We talk about it. I founded an organization called EDLOC about 8 years ago. And EDLOC is Education Leaders of Color. It came out because we'd all be at these conferences and people would say crazy stuff on the stage. And then all the people of color would look at each other and be like, meet at the bar, meet at the bar. And then the real conference would happen at the bar, right? That's when we really had the conversations that we needed to have collectively. And so we said, look, we need to bring the bar to the center and bring education leaders of color together to have these conversations. I want to know why every single foundation professional is not in those spaces connecting the dots. We have 59 different, I go to the black blah blah professionals and the black da 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 and whatever. Everybody's got their own thing. We can't, we belong to each other, and we have to start to consolidate. Those people are winning because they consolidated power. They got themselves a strategy. They got the philanthropists lined up to fund that strategy. They got the policymakers lined up to legislate that strategy. They got the activists and advocacy community out there to support that strategy. That's the belonging that I'm interested in figuring out. And I think that As I said, we have an opportunity in this particular moment to leverage these resources differently. Part of the reason why people think I'm a philanthropist, why people here think I'm a philanthropist, and I'm just going to say the thing so that, whatever, but I was blessed enough. I wasn't blessed enough. I earned the opportunity to secure a significant grant to fund this new work that I'm doing. Many of you know that I received a grant from the Bezos Family Foundation of $185 million to lead this work at this new center that I'm creating. That's half the story. There's also a $50 million match. So if I raise $50 million, that unlocks another $50 million of Bezos money for a total of a $275 million endowment, right? And the reason why I bring that up is because, one, people think I have 185 million ones in my pocket and I'm running around making it rain. I'm not. We have to explain to our people how an endowment works. The vast majority of that money goes in the bank. A year from now, I'll be able to draw a little bit off of that, maybe 4% if I'm lucky, right? That's how this thing really works. But to Ivan's point, we set this up because, so one, I was able to be at the table with somebody who was willing to make a transformative investment. Many of us have earned the right to be at that table as well. Secondly, I had a vision for what I wanted to do that was far beyond what the Aspen Institute wanted to do. When they brought me in and said, let's do this center thing, I said, great. I said, I want it endowed because I'm not running around here hustling for dollars every year. I'm too old for that. And they said, okay, what kind of an endowment are you thinking? And I said, I don't know. What do you think? And they said $50 million. And I said, $50 million is not a lot of money. That might give me $2 or $3 million a year to operate. If you want me to do big things, I need big money. And so I did my little math and I said, I need a $300 million endowment. And they said, what? And I said, that's going to spin off $12 to $15 million a year. That's good money. I could do something with that every year. And they said, we can't ask for that. And I said, why not? And they said, because the largest gift we've ever gotten before is $50 million. And I said, well, it's time to do something new. Like, all they could say is no. And so we put together a visionary plan that was worth $300 million and put it in front of Mike Bezos, who said, this is amazing. I'm in. And I want other people to join me, hence the match. And so we're doing that work. The largest gift that Aspen has ever received. Why? Because I leveraged my networks, my previous experience, my vision, and each of us in this room is similarly situated, right? But we are not thinking about that. We're not strategizing together. If I could make 185 million roll and you could make 285 million roll, why are we not sitting around together and saying, what should we be doing? If I got this part, right, I'm going to train the fuck out of young people. I am going to turn out a legion of leaders in this country. And I know how to clean it up. I'm going to talk about democracy. I'm going to talk about patriotism. I'm going to talk about belonging to the United States of America and this great nation, all that jazz. But my real goal is to turn out a legion of black and brown young people who know how to lead, who have experience leading, and who will turn this country upside down. That's my Batman work. My Bruce Wayne work is the Center for Rising Generations, right? What is your Batman work? What is your Bruce Wayne work? And where is the Justice League? Why? That is the belonging that I want to talk about.
Love it. So good. You got something to say about
No, there's all the work in between, right? Because it's a little bit of gloss over, right? How many years did you serve?
10 years, I know.
No. How many years did you serve and give of yourself to Aspen? Exactly, right? There's a long time. How many years did you get on that 22 minutes of pure hell flight? Right? How many years did you do the work to be able to say, I'm calling in my chips for the quiet, but also the very public that makes you look good? Like, it didn't happen spontaneously, right? And so that is part of the point. I mean, when we talked about even this panel, it's like, who's going to come? Who shows up for the conversation that we most want to have? And how over the next 3 or 4 days do we look each other in the eye? And we had to come far, Most of us took 2 planes to get here to be able to say, all right, I know you've been talking about that, the Batman versus the Bruce Wayne. You really ready? You ready? Are we doing this? Are we doing this now? Right? Because we've been in a lot of quiet rooms. We've been in the long skunk work to be able to call in some chips. And I think if there was ever a time, this is the time, right? It's the time to level up, not on a 2-year, not on a 4-year strategy, not on a 4-box quadrant of strategy of we win the White House, win down ballot. We lose the White House, we lose down ballot. The win-win, no. What is the infrastructure that is bigger than the shifting political tailwinds? What is the infrastructure that's not sexy, right? That allows us to chart a path and move some folks that probably don't ever want to be on Front Street with us, but to do some things because that's the belonging work, right? That's the reframe on belonging and philanthropy, because when we put out invitations in philanthropy, people will come. Yeah.
I want to open it up to folks. So let's bring your questions as you want or point of view. One of the things we want to start getting to is, I had a board member at one point say, keep doing what you're doing, keep fighting the fight, and just change the words on it. And you can go in. We could do that, but what you're saying is the opposite, and what you're doing is different. You're creating a compelling vision and opportunity that everybody can get behind, and that draws real money, real talent, and real opportunities to do this work for a long, long time. So as we start talking and we can comment more, what's the next phase of this look like? It could be something transformative than just keep doing what you're doing, just call it something else. So with that, let me just give a chance to get started with folks in the room here. I'll start right here in the back, and then we'll bring it up here. Yep. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Many of us have become skilled over the years at belonging to elite institutions, policy, philanthropy, universities. As we became more skilled at belonging to those elite institutions, in my experience, it raised suspicions about the status of my belonging to grassroots communities. So I have always had to, so belonging is not a unidimensional phenomenon, right? And there isn't only one group that gets to define what constitutes belonging. So one of my career struggles has always been how to navigate belonging in a way that I can belong to several communities, as opposed to having certain communities feel that I've abandoned them because now I belong to this other community. And I'll speak, directly about the other community, the community of white privilege. Right? Philanthropy is largely about a community of white privilege and acquiring the skills to be accepted and understood in that community, which causes suspicions in other communities. So how have you, in the course of your careers, and I know your history, many of you know mine, how have you navigated that, and how do we create a more expansive understanding of what constitutes belonging?
I'll have you add your comment or question too, and then we can respond.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Question that I had was just over the past couple of weeks, watched academia and government workers really struggle to find synonyms for DEI. And to Dr. Shorter's statement earlier about belonging is no longer about inclusion, I would love to hear you elaborate a little bit on that and how you've had to address that over the past couple of weeks, especially.
I'll blend this with Warren's statement. And so Giselle, right? The level of code switching required. I'll back into this. I was recruited for something that I spent 9 months saying no to once. And it was after my second presentation, quietly influencing the Giving Pledge community. This person recruits me. I said, no, 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 no. Here are 5 people that I think want to do the thing that you want done in the world. 9 months. Turned out all their grantees, everybody that they thought I would care about, come talk to me. I finally apply. I didn't get the job. Right? 9 months of like active pursuing, right? Trying to get folks to show up in Harlem to take me out to coffee, right? All the things. And in the way that the third panelist, right, as a dear friend that's sitting in between us, Lizette Nieves, she called me and said, Mamita, you letting this man take up real estate in your head, like, let it go. And if you have something to say, call him. So I called this guy, and I said, there's nothing in these United States. I'm sitting in Harlem. He's sitting in a unnamed 300 square foot little cabin, because that's his luxury and his prerogative to do so. There's nothing in these Americas or United States that would have you know my name and recruit me for 9 months. And on the back end of that, you said my intensity was a little bit too much, that I was trying to go somewhere that you weren't ready to go. And I said, but you knew that about me. Because if I weren't that level of intense, you would not know my name. Right? I don't have to go back 3, 4 generations. I go back 1 generation to sharecropping. Right? So I'm clear who I am. I am very forward about that. But it has brought a level of contempt, not amongst those above me, not amongst those that are hitting the bricks, doing the work day to day. My name is great with organizers, right? I can show up in the city, urban, rural communities around the country, and because I've been doing the work, folks invite me in, they invite me over to dinner, right? But it's the folks that perceive that I will upset their apple cart that say, no, 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 we're not gonna phone it in. You think because you've now moved into the realm of philanthropy that you don't have to work as hard. We fund movement, but we should be working as hard, if not harder, blocking and tackling for the folks that are doing the work, creating groundswell, ground softening, clearing the path, hosting the private and the quiet conversation. So it's that's the place where belonging has been most challenging. The folks that want what they perceive, the earned privilege and that close proximity to whiteness and all that it would bring, and don't want to do the work, put your back into it in the way that many of us that have lead, do the day-to-day work, operate. And so that's just been my truth and my experience. I speak libertarian. They can hear me, right? Even when they're slightly scandalized, I can bring them to a place. I can invite them into something without losing my credibility, right? When I'm boots on the ground in community, my name is good there, but there's this belonging in the middle, I think has been challenging personally.
Warren, I think your question is provocative. I'm reminded of Cornel West, who says you can't serve the people if you don't love the people. And the Kaya Henderson addition to that is you can't love the people if you don't know the people. And I think for far too many of us, we have traded belonging in our communities for belonging in spaces of white privilege. But you bring up an excellent point, which is my experience. You don't have to belong to just one place. My cousins and them know what my job is, and they know how to text me, call me, whatever, because I show up for the family reunions, because I go to the funerals, because I am in communication with my people. And my real challenge to us, I'm going to speak it plainly, is when we move into these other communities, we actively move out of the communities that have nurtured us. We don't stay connected. We send our kids to the fanciest schools because we think that the ice is colder on that side of town. We only vacation in certain places because we don't want to be with the riffraff. We used to be the riffraff, but we not the riffraff no more. I'm not speaking about any of you all. I'm just talking about me and people that I know. I'm talking about we belong to these exclusive clubs and organizations that used to be about mutual aid, and now they're about some other things. We can't be fighters for people that we are not in community with. And so if you are not, I mean, your word is good in the organizing world because you hang out with organizers. Now, you might also go to the consignment shop in Aspen and get a Valentino bag. I happen to know that. Cause I went with you. I went with you. I'ma keep it real. I went with you. But and we also gon' wop 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 when it's time to wop wop wop, right? Like we are masters and mistresses. We are people who belong to many different communities, and we do that well. That is a superpower of ours. And so we don't have to trade those things in, but we have to be as mindful, as intentional about cultivating and maintaining the communities that brought us here as we do the corridors of power that we think we want to belong in. Because the worst thing that is going to happen is you're going to find out that no matter where you've ascended to, you still thank you. You are still a visitor. And that's when you are going to need that community most to support you. But if you've abandoned it, then you're not good up there or over here.
Yeah. That's great stuff. I'll add one more thing and then I'll go to another question right here. I feel a big need to take that, earned position, that success financially or whatever positions, and deliver real value to those communities too. Because that's what makes us different. Yeah, I can go hang out with a familia and have tacos and stuff. That's not why, I have a responsibility now to access this and give. So one of the things, getting back to delivering outcomes, one of our big things at the foundation is how much in internship wages and jobs are we providing to young people? So we measure dollar terms, right? How many of those internships do we create? How many jobs do we make happen? That's tangible, deliverable value. Now, what's nice about that is that the community I serve loves that, to see their kids getting wages, they're helping the family, they're getting jobs that are life-changing for them. My investors, the donor base, they see it's a real ROI. Putting money and it's generating more money in these communities, that fits well. And so it's the other way to think about delivering value to those communities. I, as a landlord, right, have the benefit now of owning properties. I'm a landlord to folks who come from different places, cannot provide the most affordable home on that block by choice, right? I can make that choice. I have that power. So we take that earned privilege, value, whatever you want to call it, and now we have to translate those values to benefit of the communities. Yes. Here, I'll give you the mic.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Giada Nicola, I'm the CEO for a community foundation that is based in Haiti, that is building an endowment fund to support market-driven economy and in country, and that is mobilizing the diaspora and investors in an international way to be able to do so. And this conversation is very poignant, and you addressed to some extent some of the question that I had, which is the sense to me where it feels like being in the space of philanthropy, in this process of belonging, even as you're mentioning, because there's a group of investors that you really want to be able to connect with and so on. But to do so, it always feels to me that there's a sense of yourself, or there's an identity shifting that needs to happen, that one needs to lose in aspects of oneself. And Michael last panel talked about doing your soul work. And sometimes soul work does not lend itself well in philanthropy space. spaces, right, in the same way. And I wanted you to share a bit around this sort of like maybe 2 or 3 tips for those of us who are finding ourselves in this work, and how do you maintain your identity and your soul work, but at the same time needs the coin in order for you to be able to do that work. So thank you.
Thank you. Great stuff. We got a little time left. Let's keep her
Yeah, I think there are 3 things that I would encourage. One, resisting the idea that you have to actually be different. It's the chilling effect that the current administration is banking on. It is the Kaiser Sose effect. If they tell us it's real enough, then we start to believe it's real. I think the second is friends, co-conspirators that, what did my grandmother used to say, pull you and tell you your slip is showing, right? That are like, girl, cover your flank, like a little too much is out, right? Creating a space where you have those that are walking in the same spaces, even if when you walk down the hall is not an embrace, and you save that for the bar, you save that for, I'm coming over to dinner, but in the space, you can actually get some things done because you're not perceived as friends and homies. I think the final thing, though, is being excruciatingly intentional about curating and playing that long game. I personally made a horse trade. I gave up money, and I threw my lot in with a billionaire couple. And the horse trade, what I got it in return is, you will let me write your Forbes articles, you will let me curate your voice, you will let me make, and we got it down to 6 asks a year, where they would go and have a conversation with their friends, right? That is the level of intentionality, because I was not unclear and I was never uncompromised in what I was trying to get done. But I was also negotiating like, okay, I'm not going to be invited into those spaces. I'm not even going to be a visitor, right? I can be a guest speaker at a Jeffersonian dinner. I'm the expert sage. Then they tried out the Dr. Shorter. But generally speaking, I actually needed some other folks to block and tackle for me and the work. And I think being really clear about how you use some of those relationships intentionally and with their knowledge.
I'll say just 2 quick things. One is I just have to double click underscore Giselle's admonition that you do not have to not be yourself. In fact, we need you to be yourself. Authenticity is critical, I've learned, in leadership. And in fact, people respect you more when you're authentic. They might say, that's not my bag and I can't fund that. But there are other people who will see you and what you're actually coming with and say, that is my bag. And so be yourself, keep knocking on doors, you'll find your people. The second thing that I'll say is what I said before, which is you have to stay in community. You have to stay in community, because if you are with the people that you are trying to help, you can only get so hoity-toity before they tell you, nah, sis, that's not what we doing. And so you need your people to keep it real. Yes, we need to deliver jobs and internships and whatnot, but I'm talking about you as a leader, what you need to feed your soul to keep you fighting in this fight. You have to stay proximate to the people that you are serving. That will be that will be the conviction, that will be the algorithm in your gut that tells you, no, not this person. There have been philanthropists who have been like, Kaya, I want to give you money. Name your thing. Tell me what it is. And my algorithm, which is just pattern recognition, because I've seen this before and I've done this before, not you. All money ain't good money. I don't want that money. I only know that because I remain authentic. Not if I'm just trying to play the game, I'm taking that money. And so your authenticity is actually a key filter to help you do the work that you need to do.
We got to close. So the last thing I'm going to say is Amazing. Yes. Stay, be true to who you are. A lot of philanthropists really want genuine people. They're tired of yes people who just tell them whatever they want to hear. So be you. And also remember, just be cautious of authenticity and ego, right? Ego gets in the way of, I need to be. Sometimes we have to be the leaders that our people need, not necessarily the leaders we think we ought to be. And so just, it's the hard work of leadership, the trade-offs and the choices you got to make. Anyway, with that, please join me in thanking our panelists. Thanks very much.